You're listening to the Cars of Carlisle Network, podcast episode number 137, featuring the history of Hummer with Lou Giannakopoulos and Sam Faringer. Remember, this is your podcast. Together, it's all about car community, car culture.
Cars of Carlisle is your favorite internationally downloaded podcast about all things automotive. Darren and his CFC team are ever searching for interesting automotive happenings, real stories about real car people, and fun features to inform and entertain you. Each week, the Cars of Carlisle crew brings you show topics ranging from car shows to team adventures to auto racing weekends to behind-the-scenes human interest stories from car nuts that live across town, across the country, or even across the globe. Come join the road trip.
On today's Intracast, Sam and Lou will drive you through the history of the iconic off-road brand Hummer. The guys dig deep into Hummer's timeline, from its early days as a military-issue vehicle to the heavily anticipated all-electric variant for 2021. It's time to go off the paved road and learn more about Hummer. So, let's get revved up.
Hello and welcome back, Cubers, to your favorite informative automotive podcast. I am your trusted host, Darren. As always, it is so good to have you come back with us again this week. Thank you for your support. In a few minutes, we'll be handing the keys over to the young guns on the CFC crew for this Intracast installment featuring the history of the Humvee. By the way, Cubers, have you subscribed to Cars of Carlisle? If not, please do. That way, each and every week, the episode is queued up and ready for you. We would also appreciate it if you feel we earn it. 5 stars in iTunes will help a long way with our street cred. And on top of that, please spread the word. Let your car clubs, car buddies, friends, family, colleagues know all about us. That will help us grow and we can bring even better content to you. And we look forward to continuing to meet and exceed your expectations each and every week. In fact, we're working on a lot of great episodes coming up here for not only the end of the 2020 year, but also and a strong start to the first quarter of 2021. Looking to be doing some on-location episodes once things start to lighten up with the pandemic situation, and interviews with a wide variety of folks in our industry, including GT race car driver, talking to folks that are doing amazing customs on the West Coast. So stay tuned. We are pulling together some great guests as we get into this brand new year. Before we get too far down the line, I want to take a moment to say thank you so very much to our OEM sponsor, our exclusive automotive dealership sponsor here for the Cars of Carlisle Network, and that is Porsche Mechanicsburg. We are definitely proud to be affiliated with the entire team of experts at Porsche Mechanicsburg. And we would like to help celebrate with them that they are now officially in their brand new state-of-the-art Porsche Center, which is located at 6625 Carlisle Pike in Mechanicsburg, just a short drive from Carlisle, about 15 minutes, and you'll be there. And in this facility, I was just telling a friend recently that it is, when you see the pristine cleanliness and the white walls and the white flooring and just how everything is just so precise and just clean. Like, I can't even get over how clean it is. It's like watching these high-end vehicles in surgery. It's incredible. If you are in the market for a brand new Porsche or perhaps a pre-owned or a Porsche certified vehicle, be sure to check out Porsche Mechanicsburg. They are part of the Faulkner Automotive Group and have been around bringing excellence to this area since 1932.
Thank you, Darren, for the introduction. And Sam, we are back on another installment of the Sam and Lou Intracast. No idea what number this is. Probably 6.
It's definitely more than 6.
No, I don't think so.
It's like 14.
All right, well, whatever. For the loyal viewers, if you could tell us how many of these there have been, and you can email us, there will be a prize to be named later, and you may or may not receive it. Today's trivia question: what famous Hollywood actor pressured AM General to bring the Humvee to the civilian market? Anyway, we are taking a different approach, kind of sticking to what we've done recently, right? In terms of the ultimate ending of this will result in talking about a vehicle that is returning to a lineup near you in 2021. and is really reshaping the automobile industry as we know it. Talking about the Ford Bronco. No, I'm just kidding. We are talking about the Hummer EV, re-released under GM's brand for the fall of 2021. You'll see most of its production run in 2022. We're going to take a look back at basically it becoming from war hero to Hollywood poser vehicle to electric super truck that is not owned by Elon Musk. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And we should definitely do an episode on the Bronco, because once you said that, I got real excited. So yeah, Louis, we're going to talk about the Hummer today, and just a quick preface that Lou is going to do most of the heavy lifting today, as here in Pennsylvania, it is currently deer season, and I've spent way too much time in the woods. So with that being said, let's start off, Louis, with kind of the beginnings, who owned Hummer, where did it come from? What was the foundation of the company there?
Yeah, and I'm a vegan. I don't believe in hunting. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, it started with, ironically enough, a company that previously we did a podcast on, Studebaker. Really, their roots are back to Studebaker. The Humvee was created by AM General, which was really started, if you go back to like 1861, it's a company that's based out of South Bend, Indiana, lands its first military contract in 1861, has a successful run with the U.S. military, producing a number of things from wooded carts to different types of like machinery stuff. To be honest, I didn't read too much into it. There wasn't that much information, but if you fast forward the clock 40 years to 1903, another company that eventually becomes AM General, these are all like subsidiary companies prior to, as a precursor, they produced the Overland Runabout. Overland had a brief stint in the auto industry as well. Then another precursor of AM General develops the four-wheel drive vehicle that wins World War II, better known as the Jeep. They are one of the founders of the Jeep platform. Obviously, a lot of that was produced by Willis and Ford Motor Company, but AM General developed the four-wheel drive Jeep in 1940 for the U.S. military. And then we're just going to kind of skip everything from 1940 through 1983, where they win another contract as AM General this time with the U.S. military to produce 55 Humvees over 5 years, 55,000 Humvees over 5 years, which was an initial deal worth of just under $1 billion. So that was the first 5 years. As of 2012, there have been 280,000 military Humvees and a number of different variations that you'll talk about later produced by AM General for the U.S. military. So if you look at that first stretch, right, a lot of U.S. military focus. And I know we're going to come right back to the Humvee, but in 1992, AM General does launch its first civilian Humvee, known as the world's most serious 4x4. This was, ironically enough, pushed by none other than Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who at the time was just a movie star, I believe. I don't think he was governor yet. I didn't look that up prior to. Probably should have.
He definitely was not. No, he was in like Kindergarten Cop and stuff at this time. Like,
yeah, well, that
like
was
right after Terminator kind of stuff. Like,
I didn't
not
write
even
the
close to
movie
the
down.
governor.
It was one of his movies in the early 90s that he had like a fleet of Humvees on set and was like, wow, you guys should really produce these. But AM General was already considering them for civilian production back in the late 80s, just didn't really get everything together in terms of like FDA approved or not FDA approved. Didn't get everything together in terms of a civilian branded vehicle to sell to the public. But from 1992 to 1998, they are producing civilian Humvees on their own as a complete independent. And then in 1999, AM General agrees to sell the Humvee brand to GM, still in a partnership producing them, but having GM's dealership network, licensing, marketing, etc., to help make a successful run at it. So before we get into the civilian stuff, I think it is important to cover the Humvee itself, because obviously that's really what they ultimately produced as a civilian version. Certainly a unique vehicle in its own right. Has served many different tours and different wars, starting with Desert Storm. So, Sam, take it away, friend.
Yeah, before we get into the military applications and the genesis of the Humvee, two quick notes. The movie that you were talking about with Arnold, where he first saw the Humvees, he was out in Oregon filming a movie and saw them and just thought they looked awesome. That was Kindergarten Cop. I had to check because I don't know why that stuck in my head. Secondly, AM General became a subsidiary of AMC in 71. So just a little more history on like the parent company of that.
Cool.
So the military Humvee originally was part of a prototype program and eventually production program to supplement the Jeep, like Lou talked about, as an all-purpose military vehicle. We kind of know of Humvees now as a little more like armored troop carriers, but they had a lot of variants, which I'll go into a couple of them later, which are pretty cool. But originally they just started as troop carriers, and the government put out the bid to 61 interested companies that, they were looking for this prototype, and only 3 responded, one of them being AM General, Teledyne, and Chrysler. So of those, only those 3 submitted proposals were, up for consideration. And in 1981, AM General was awarded the contract to develop more prototypes of their initial prototype for the proposal. The original M998AO series had a curb weight of 5,200 pounds, a payload of 2,500 pounds, and was offered in either a 6.2 V8 diesel or a 6.3 liter gasoline with a 3-speed automatic transmission. So once these 3 companies were given the go-ahead to make these prototypes, they were chosen and they built 11 HMMWV, which is where we get Humvee from. It's like a shortened version way to say that. So there was 11 prototypes made, and they were subject to all these sorts of tests where they had to withstand in Arctic conditions, desert conditions, and traveled a collective 600,000 miles to do so. Off-road courses, stress tests, like longevity tests, all that. So that was in 1981 to 1982, those tests were going. And in 1983, as Lou alluded to earlier, they were awarded the initial contract. The initial contract was for 2,334 vehicles. And eventually that led to 55,000 over the first 5-year contract, 39,000 which went to the Army, and then the rest were pretty much put into multiple wars throughout the years. So I don't want to go too much into it, but the Humvee, isn't the Hummer that we know. It wore a lot of different hats, and it wears a lot of different hats for the military still. I personally, and Lou used to, we live near Fort Indiantown Gap. It's nothing to see a convoy heading to the Gap. And you'll see 6 or 7 different Humvees, and they're all outfitted completely differently. So there were 17 total variations that Humvee made for the military market. And those were everything from like a missile carrier to ambulances, to your basic, just your troop transport. In later years, when urban warfare kind of developed more and the unarmored Humvee was seen as inadequate, especially with the rise of IEDs and things like that, more heavily armored versions were made, and that kind of became the standard. But they would remove the armor if they needed it for anything else. They used them as platforms for satellites, tractors. They used semi-trailers on them, heavy assault for Marines. They did a whole lot with them, which is pretty crazy how versatile they are. One of the coolest ones it was called the Scorpion. It had an 82 millimeter automatic mortar on it. So it's essentially just like a cannon that could drive around at 50 miles an hour, which is pretty sweet. And it could shoot up to 4,000 meters. So without getting too much further into it, because there's a ton of history, and if you're into military history, just like you are automotive, read about the military variants, because like I said, there's a lot out there. They've done a lot and been extremely, extremely versatile. So with that being said, Louis, how did we get to the H1, like the first Hummer that was offered to the civilian market?
And now for something completely different, the H1. No, in all seriousness, it basically was a civilian version with slightly more amenities than what you would find in Desert Storm. And I mean, like literally the first variations of them, especially when they were still being produced by AM General, was a slightly different civilian version that had air conditioning and CD player, slightly more comfortable seats, things like air conditioning and power windows. That's really all I
think
could
that's
say.
it. Yeah, there's really.
And a sound system.
And they said a lot of like early adopters of it, they had the real tiny little steering wheels. Like,
yep.
It was, essentially a stripped down military vehicle that they threw a better upholstery in and some air.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even joking when I say there's really not much difference. And the cool thing about the H1 was, so from 1992 to 1998, AM General just sold the Humvee, the civilian version, as the Hummer. When GM took over in 1999, and when I say took over, they agreed with that deal, but AM General was still producing the H1 and also produced the H2. GM literally just added H1. There's really no other difference. Same engine, transmission, drivetrain, etc. And I think what's important to talk about there is throughout the 14-year production cycle, the engines relatively stayed the same. They were predominantly diesel. There was a gasoline engine, although most of what you'll find for sale today is diesel, and they ranged anywhere from like the 6.2 GM diesel, 6.5 GM diesel, and then later they went to a 6.5 in the last year was the 6.6 Duramax, which was by far the best combination. That's why the 2006 is the last year that you'll talk about are the most desirable, and it's not even close. But if you take the military vehicle and the Hummer H1, most is the same. Brakes, axles, frame, major body panels like the hood, tailgate, quarter panels, it's all shared. They're basically produced on the same assembly line where civilian versions were just taken out and painted in a different building across the parking lot.
Yeah, and they still had like the hooks on.
Yeah,
like the I don't know what front strut report or strut post or I don't know where they're on the frame, but so you could drop them out of a helicopter.
Yeah,
like the civilian version still had all those.
You're literally buying military grade equipment through a GM dealership if it's 1999 or later. Like it's pretty crazy. And then other things like they're known to be super stable. They have 16 inches of ground clearance for the H1. Like they're huge vehicles, but they're still pretty nimble in terms of getting through different terrain.
They better be stable. I mean, they're wide as hell.
Yeah, they're huge. They have a central tire inflation system that's military grade to decrease and increase tire pressure basically on the go. They have, a radiator, right? It's like cocked back for best airflow. And this is because they had to withstand crawling through deserts at 5, 6, 7, 8 miles per hour. They have run flat tires, a forward hinged hood. The intake is high mounted to be able to go through a substantial amount of water. You got options like leather seats, a winch kit, and a running board. Like it was pretty bare bones stuff for H1.
Yeah, and they could what, like 30 inches of water, almost 3 feet of water they could go through.
Crazy. Just like it's nothing. I remember there was a game for PlayStation 2. It was like Test Drive Off-Road, I believe it was called, and you would just be able to drive up like Hawaiian volcanoes, which obviously isn't true, but for a kid in the 90s, like that was everything. That's all you wanted to do is take your H1 out and drive up the side of a volcano. Yeah,
but I mean, in the real world application of that in the H1, I mean, their approach and departure angles were extremely high, due to that extremely high setting frame, wide tires. Like they could go up a hill. I mean, I don't know if they're going to go up the side of a mountain, but
Now, The only thing that you were measuring really when you looked at fuel consumption was the age-old phrase, miles per gallon, because you could basically watch it go from full to empty. And I'm talking about both tanks, the initial tank and the reserve tank that you could just flip with the switch of a button. They both drain very quick. We're talking like at best 10 miles per gallon, but you really only saw those off the nicest of driving. It was really an average of 6.6. Which would happen when you have a 10,000 pound vehicle getting, driven like a daily. So that wasn't a huge selling point. Total production only included 11,818, including 729 for the last year, which we're going to highlight a little bit because they are by far the most collectible, which really isn't a lot, especially if you look at the H2 production that we'll talk about later. But certainly a cult following. Really, if you look at like the 90s overall, there aren't major vehicles produced that are awesome. And this is certainly one of them. If you look back to any movie during that time, anyone in Hollywood had one. They have a strong collectible following today and a really unique vehicle. So want to talk about the Alpha, and then we'll move on to the less cooler versions of other things.
Yeah, so in 2006, Hummer offered the H1 Alpha, which essentially, was the baddest of the baddest of the H1s. It was re-engineered with the Duramax diesel that Lou talked about and 5-speed Allison, and had the same engine from GM's GMT 560 trucks. But due to the constraints of essentially the height and the depth of the engine compartment, they had to change 23 components to get it to fit in there, and then lift the body another 2 inches to fit the engine and the turbo housing underneath the upper body panels and hood. This came with 300 horsepower and 520 foot-pounds of torque, which with these H1s being so stinking big, obviously their gas mileage is crappy because they don't have a lot of horsepower, but they also were kind of lacking, especially in like the lower engine models, in their towing capacity or even just, low end torque. And this was a huge thing for them, the H1 Alpha, because it really it went straight headlong into the off-roading roots of it. They made some more cooling modifications to it and allowed for negative 30-degree starts. Not really sure when you'd ever need that, but I think if you have a Hummer, you might be one of the people that do. And even though it was produced from 2005 to mid 2006, there was actually no production on the Hummer. Am I right on that, Lou? There was none produced in 2005, so they were all built in 06.
Yep, correct.
Okay. And then, like you said earlier, there's 729 of these H1 Alphas built. And again, they are the most desirable, the most expensive. A typical H1, like if you're to go on to, I don't know, any, used car website online, you're going to look between like 40, 90,000. The H1s Alphas are typically over 100 grand. And I think the most expensive Hummer around currently, I think that's a $285,000 Hummer. That's, spec'd out to be awesome, but based off the 2006 design.
Moving on, the H2. Disclaimer, we're not going to talk about the H2 and the H3 that much. The H2 a little bit more than the H3. But I will say one interesting fact that I did not know going into this. I thought it was all sequential production, meaning like H1 had its production run. That was axed, then H2, axed, then H3. There was 1 year where the H1, H2, and H3 were all being produced at the same time, 2006. However, they're all produced in vastly different ways. The H2, while I think of it as a poser vehicle, and correct me if I'm wrong, like you're not bringing your H2 off-roading anywhere. Do you have any qualms with that? It's basically a Hollywood, like Entourage, any Hollywood movie from 2002 to 2007 has a Hummer H2 in it somewhere.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, it's better than the H3.
Correct, which is actually a nice riding vehicle. I've been in one. I've never been in an H2, nor have I been in an H1. The H2 specifically still had off-roading capabilities. While it was much more GM, it was produced by AM General on a modified. They basically took like the subframe, if you cut it into a subframe of a full-size 2500 series truck, and then the next three-quarter, right, from like the firewall back is a 1500 that's grafted together, a series truck, and it's a beefy chassis. Like, it's nothing to joke about. It's also a very beefy vehicle with a mostly stock LS series motor, so it doesn't really move. If you look at the 2002 6.0 LQ4 that was in it, it's only 316 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 10.9 seconds. And as you get going through the production, they step it up with an LQ4 that had a different crank, better heads. That was 325 horsepower, and then up to 393 from the 6.2 L92 in 2008 and 2009, which is really nothing to laugh at. If you're looking for an LS, go find a wrecked H2. That's a good one to go.
Yeah, any of those engines would be great as a swap.
So AM General starts producing these in 2001 for GM to have an official like production run starting in 02. They sold a lot of them. I mean, 2002 was 18,861. 03 gets up to 34,000, which is the high in the 7-year production run, which I guess doesn't say that much, but from 02 to 09, it's 153,026 sold. So a hair over 152 or 153 grand. They had standard features like air conditioning, tri-zone climate, tilt leather wrapped steering wheels with custom radio controls, cruise leather, heated front and rear seats, power seats that can go pretty much every way possible, dual memory system for the seats, Bose sound, different type of CD options, which is kind of funny. MP3 capability in 2008. That's kind of a big deal for the time. It had independent torsion bar suspension, 5-link coil springs, and pretty much that was it. Now, the rear spring setup was specifically for the H2. A lot of this other stuff is GM parts interchangeability, but it had a lot going on, admittedly, for being the most expensive SUV, I think, on the market, outside of the most loaded Escalade. I think this is second. So
even more than like Lincoln Navigators and stuff.
Yeah,
they were like so. High end at that point.
I mean, I'll look it up, but 2002 Hummer H2 MSRP, 57.5 for an 08 MSRP Hummer H2, and for a Lincoln Navigator of the same vintage.
I guess a better question would have been, did they even make a Lincoln Navigator in 2002? I actually have no idea.
I have 08 here. Right before the big gas crunch, the 08 Navigator started at 48.5. So almost 10 grand over sticker. Pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add on the H2?
Not really. No. Other than the fact that they used the LS family of engines, like kind of poorly, mainly because they weren't designed to carry around 6,000 to 8,000 pound vehicles.
Sure.
There's not much about the H2s that I really care for.
With that, I will say the H2 didn't totally die by the housing bubble. It was also coupled with an emissions crunch, which it was too heavy to meet. Power would have been non-existent. It would have been like driving a V6 Camaro from 1968. I don't know. Not fun is what I'm getting at. Although you might look like you're having fun. Sorry, Camaro guys. Sorry, Brian. Do we want to talk about the H3 or no?
Yeah. In contrast, one last thing on the H2. Earlier we said I think you could get an H1, like average H1 price if you were to go buy one right now, somewhere in like the 60,000 range. You can have them as low as like, I don't know, 39.95 up to 90 grand. H2s, again, you can see they're less desirable. You're looking in like the $10,000 to $30,000 range. More of them and not nearly as cool. And then we can get into the worst of the bunch, the H3, which I think you can pick those up for like $5,000.
So,
The average is like 15, but I mean, they're just not good.
yeah, I mean, I have in our notes here H3 equals barf sandwich because that's basically what it is. However, I will say it's probably important to note that it was basically on a modified Chevy Colorado or GMC Canyon chassis. It was built by GM, not AM General. So this was the first time that they used just the AM General name Hummer and had no production input, had no design input. It was totally done by GM. And I guess it's also important to note that the H2 visually was designed by GM. So if you buy a Hummer H3, it either came out of Shreveport, Louisiana, or Port Elizabeth in South Africa. And
Shreveport.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Sorry. And while it's most enthusiasts that either own an H3 or know about them basically say it's a modified Colorado or GMC Canyon. GMC claims that they only share 10% of the same components, including the fact that the H3 has a modified and reinforced chassis for heavy off-road duties. But again, who's bringing their H3 off-road in any capacity?
It's like an 8,000-pound GMC Jimmy. Like,
yeah, it's crazy. However,
they came with six cylinders.
Yeah, they did.
Like, just garbage.
Yep. But I wouldn't say they weren't successful. From only being produced, 2006 through 2009, they made 156,000 of them. That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. And, we're kind of talking down on them because they're less of the, huge Hummer that, we picture in action movies and stuff like that. But Lou, you'd mentioned the gas crisis, and, GM was trying to change the image of the Hummer. The Hummer lived in this extremely weird bubble in public persona, and a lot of this was fueled by people like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and it was like a symbol of machismo and like manliness and excess and not caring that you only get 6 miles to the gallon. And it had this very much I mean even the ad campaigns were. I watched a couple ads while I was doing research for this, and it was like this dude buying tofu, and somebody like made fun of him, so he went and bought a Hummer because he wanted to be a man. And their tagline was "Restore the balance."
Yeah, just crazy.
Hummer really played into this like machismo, like this very manly masculinity, and like they kind of rejected the thought of the heterosexual male that was coming out during that time. And the gas crisis and kind of America's changing views on masculinity saw this. There was that short window where this could have existed, and then it kind of changed. And you can see from the H1 to the H3 where they tried to, I don't want to say reduce their carbon footprint, but they did, with going to the 6-cylinder and really trying to make it more of a, I don't know, like a sports utility vehicle than what the H1 was, but that was just essentially a military vehicle. But that masculinity thing ultimately just kind of ended. So with that too, the Hummer ended, and that was 2009 last year for it.
Technically, yes. Now you could still buy a brand new Hummer H3 in 2010. That was sold as a 2009. They did not sell well in 2009, with a whopping total of 5,487 sold. So if you look at that 156 to 159,000, depending on what was ultimately produced, only 5,400 in the last year of production. Anyway, that's all hot garbage. Anything
Yeah,
else you
so
want to add?
No. I want to move on to the real reason we're probably talking about this is I'm sure during anybody who's a football fan probably saw the spot with LeBron James during the most recent Super Bowl, which was the Hummer's answer to Tesla's Cybertruck, and it was the commercial reveal of the Hummer EV. So we're going to get into that a little bit before we wrap up on our parting thoughts. So, Louis, take it away with what do you know about the EV?
I mean, I'm not going to hold back. I honestly, I think it is far and away a better looking vehicle than, if you look at like the Wrangler 392 that came out, if you look at the Bronco, if you look at the Cybertruck, obviously.
Oh, dude, but yeah,
any of
by
the
far.
EVs out there, like this is a good looking vehicle, especially how they have the quarter panels formed. Like it looks like a beefy truck. And admittedly, it's an expensive truck. Your sticker, fully loaded one's going for like, first of all, if you can even get on the waiting list. Second of all, you got to wait until fall of 2021. Third of all, it's like $122,000 sticker if you have all the cool stuff like the infinity roof, the crab walking, all that different stuff.
Crab walk you don't get yet.
Well, I'm saying
that doesn't come in until spring of 2003. So, real quick, so there's
three phases, right?
4 phases of the, I don't know, they have a weird naming convention, but 4 phases of the Hummer EV. So it's going to be the Hummer EV Edition 1, the EV2, the EV2X, and then the EV3X.
Like an iPhone.
Yeah. Now, what's crazy is that you'd think, they add some stuff to each of these packages, right? Like these are later model years and like future generations. But what's weird is the Hummer EV Edition 1, the one that we currently, we could have gotten, which, quick aside, they set a record. The EV1 sold out on their online reservations in 10 minutes. That's how quickly this thing sold. I don't know the numbers on how many they had for reservation, but completely sold out within 10 minutes of a car. Like, that's insane. But Lou, tell me about the specs on this EV1 before we get into any of the other ones, because I was about to say, you'd think that they would get better as time goes on, but they don't. This EV Edition 1 this thing is going to be insane.
So this is before the watts of freedom conversation, fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what we do know. First of all, the original H1 had 16 inches of ground clearance. I think it's funny. Or 15.9 inches. No, 16 inches of ground clearance. The EV has 15.9 inches, so it looks lower, but it's really not. It's got the same ground clearance. It has a 3-motor E4-wheel drive system that is torque vectoring and has, a modest 1,000 horsepower and 11,500 foot-pounds of torque capability.
Hold on.
11,500.
11,500 foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah.
And 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah, 11,500 foot-pounds of horse torques, delivered through 3 batteries. It also has like a incredibly fast charging system that can add 100 miles of range in 10 minutes. And I believe total range, I just had the number, is estimated right around 350 miles.
Yeah, 350. Right? Mm-hmm.
Do you think that has anything to do with it being 350 kW DC?
Not at all.
Okay. Cool. Keep that
you got to think like a normal, like I have a 2011 Silverado. It's got a 5.3 LS family engine in it that I think I get like 400 or so miles of the gallon. Like I think that's just average. And now this is getting 350, and it also has about, I don't even know, 2,000% more torque.
Yep. That's probably a rough estimate. The best version of the H2 would run 0 to 60 in just under 10 seconds, about 9.1. This runs 0 to 60 in just under 3 seconds.
It's just crazy.
Find me another
Like, that's
truck
supercar.
that runs under 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
Maybe like the Cyclones.
There's no such thing as a Cyclone.
What are
TRX?
Typhoons? No. There's
Oh,
old
from old. No, they were sub. I mean,
fives.
a Grand National was 4.5, so they had the
Somewhere.
same. They had a 4.1 turbo V6, so they were like, I believe they're all-wheel drive systems because I don't think they were four-wheel drive. I could be wrong there. They were. If they were sub 4, that was moving, but that's also 1990.
And well, much smaller trucks too. And I also don't know what the Ford Raptor runs, but I'm assuming those are pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely, but they're not sub 3 second. Nothing.
No. I'm saying these are the fastest of the fast trucks that we can talk about, and they're nothing. They don't even hold a candle to this.
Well, we're not even done yet. I mean, let's talk about the four-wheel steer. I know we can't talk about the crab walking yet, but it has four-wheel steering capability, which GM had 20 years ago, bringing it back. They had an opportunity to create extract mode, which will raise your Hummer EV by another 6 inches, and then also your stock tire ride height is 35 inches. Well, it has the capability to increase that to by another 2 inches to 37. I have no idea how. It has underbody armor. It has an ultra vision system that includes underbody cameras to help navigate tricky terrain. The list goes on. It's crazy. I mean, honestly, like, you read one article and you just pick up on little things that are just like, holy.
Dude, they're so cool. So the first round of the reservations before we move on to the next ones for the EV ones. Yeah, I'm sorry. The naming conventions are so weird. Hummer EV Edition 1s. They're only going to be offered in the two-tone white with the black roof and bronze wheels. No other options. Not like anybody cared. So, Lou, what is watts to freedom?
Well, I mean, first of all, you didn't talk about the horrible gas mileage it gets. No, that one fell on deaf ears.
1,000 horsepower, horse torques.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay.
I don't care if something's 1,000 horsepower. I don't really care how many miles to the gallon. I mean, and it's not even miles to the gallon.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, I'm sorry, that was a terrible joke. Feel free to cut that out. So anyway, Watts to Freedom, which they just did a quick promo. It was like a 30-second clip that you could see if you just Google Watts to Freedom. Essentially, it's what you're going to get when, like, Tesla launched whatever it was called, like insane mode, or there was another name for it too. It starts with an L. Ludicrous. There you go. It puts your EV in a launch control type setting to rival, anything on the road and achieve that 0 to 60 in just under 3 seconds. I mean, it's 3 seconds on the dot. I don't know why we're saying just under. It's 3.
Yeah, and you got to think. I mean, instant power to the ground with the electric motors. It's just, and it's 4-wheel. I mean, it's instant power as soon as.
It's crazy. It's just. I mean, we like the infinity roof. You don't really, if you're buying this truck, which I don't think anybody is, to haul any type of like cargo. It doesn't have a big box. I think it's only 4.25 feet, something like that. But it's got pretty much everything. It's got a hands-free driving system that's already been tested on 200,000 miles of roads, and it's got automatic lane changing. I mean, what doesn't it have? It's crazy.
Yeah, they're insane. I mean, it's like I'm a GM fanboy, so I'm a little biased here.
Same
but
here.
Like when Ford came out with the Mustang,
the grill is awesome. It lights up like.
Dude, sweet.
It's
but
great.
when Ford came out with the Mustang EV, the like SUV electric Mustang or whatever, that I don't even know what that thing was, but when they came out with that, like, it's kind of like, oh, you're taking like a good brand and making it bad. When I first heard of the electric Hummer, I was like, God, you're just gonna ruin this thing. But boy, did they knock it out of the park. I mean, it looks so good. especially compared to things like the Mustang EV. The Ford Bronco, while not a bad looking car in my opinion, the new one, not great. I mean, it's okay. But this, like, they kept true to the Hummer stylings, like the big, boxy, like in your face, but kind of made it a little subtler. You see like the curvature, like going down at the front of the hood down into like the headlights, like it kind of curves up at the sides. It took away a little bit of that boxiness, but not in a way that the H2 and the H3 did, which kind of made it look like, I don't know, like a bloated SSR or, I don't know, whatever those PT Cruisers. It looked like a fat PT Cruiser. This thing looks sweet though. The new ones are awesome. They have tow hooks. I mean, obviously you can get a winch, anything you need. You could pull an RV with a boat behind it while you're pulling a horse trailer, all with, for 350 miles. It's just insane.
So if we just look at, like I said, the EV1 starts at about 112. It's got the tri-motor, the 350 mile range, the 1,000 horsepower, watts to freedom, which I forgot to mention, lowers your vehicle 2 inches before you launch to achieve freedom. It's also the EV2, which ironically enough doesn't come out until 2024 because the EV3X comes after Edition 1. The EV3X, which is going to be available fall 2022, starts at just under 100 grand, 99,995. That's still the same tri-motor setup, but it only has a 300 plus mile range as well as a whopping 800 horsepower and 9,500 foot-pounds of torque.
Still insane.
Yeah.
But again, so listen to these naming conventions. The fall 2021, you can get the Hummer EV Edition 1.
Yep.
You'd expect the next one to be the EV2. Nope.
Yep. No.
Fall 2022, you get the EV3X. Then in spring 2023, you can get the EV2X. And then you can get the EV2 in spring 2024.
What do you think is better, the EV2X or the EV3X?
Well, okay, so let me at least say
I know the answer.
Let me say what the EV2X is. So there's only one reason why I'd pick the 2X. The 3X has it in. Oh wait, no. I would definitely pick the 3X. Definitely pick the 3X.
The 2X, you only get 2 motors.
Yeah, and I was gonna say the 2X didn't include the crab walk, but it actually does. So the EV3X, you went over the specs for that. So in comparison, the EV2X is $89,995 MSRP, available again in spring of 23. Went from the three motor setup to a 2 motor setup with an estimated 300 plus mile range, similar to the EV3X, and a big drop from especially the EV1 to 625 horsepower and 7,400 foot-pounds of torque. Now, to answer your question, definitely the 3X, because the EV2X has the crab walk, which was part of that commercial that we referenced earlier, which, Lou, do you want to explain what the crab walk is?
You explain it.
Sure. So the crab walk is essentially it's like a 4-wheel symmetrical steering system. So if you have an obstruction in front of you, you don't have enough room to pull forward and as you're turning the wheel to make the arc of your turn, essentially all 4 wheels will turn at once and move you not laterally, more diagonally around that. Where this will come into handy in the off-road world is getting around obstructions, rocks, boulders, stuff like that. Where people are actually going to probably use it is parallel parking. So it's a really cool feature though, and that was like a big thing that they brought up in that Super Bowl ad.
And I'm sorry, the reason I had you explain it, I was just looking at things on the website to see what we missed, which I guess the major thing is this will be sold as a GMC, not Hummer as a standalone brand for the first time, which is pretty cool. Doesn't really matter one way or another, but it does have a small GMC badge on the front grille.
Yeah, we did forget to. I mean, it's a model. It is not a brand. It's a model.
It is pretty unique too. It has I mentioned the underbody cameras, but they give you everything from like a pitch angle to how much degrees of roll you have in it. Like it is super dedicated to the off-roader. I don't know if anyone's going to take this off-roading. I don't know if a serious off-roader has 113 grand to spend. Are they going to spend it on this, or are they going to buy a Jeep with the best of the best, right? Like I don't know. I don't
trophy
know if
truck
market
or something
segment
like that.
exists. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But for someone who's just fanning about it and looking at the 35-inch tires that are custom built from Goodyear, like it's amazing.
Now, one of the things I do wonder about, and we have anything from here on out on this is all speculation because we have no idea. I really do wonder what the ongoing maintenance costs of it are. One thing I did look at, I'm not going to get too into it, but what I wanted to look at the H1, the H2, and the H3, what the prices were for like regular maintenance. So obviously you have like the sunken cost of gas, but I was like, are they expensive to own? They're really not. Especially when you get into like the H3 where it's like straight GM, you can go buy every part at Napa. You're good. Most of the H1 stuff you can still get, but I'm really wondering with these, obviously there's not a huge aftermarket for the EVs. Well, there's almost no aftermarket at all yet for EV trucks. I'm just wondering how much those tires that you just mentioned that somehow magically grow 2 inches, all the cameras, all the crab walk systems, the motor, like the electric motors themselves, like how much is that going to cost to maintain over the long term? It's $120,000 to invest, but if you are serious about off-roading this thing, what's that going to cost you if something breaks?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. And, they show an underbody photo of all of the armor available for specifically the chassis, right? I don't know how tires grow 2 inches. I might have just misread that, to be honest, because it says there's 37-inch tires available, but I don't know. I would think, right, like a Tesla, there isn't that much maintenance cost, at least to my knowledge.
Well, I don't know, because Tesla has a weird model when it comes to their maintenance, and that is that like it's really, really, really hard to work on your own Tesla. It's really hard to get.
Just a quick Google: 37-inch tires are available.
But like
beadlock
Tesla,
tires will be beadlock wheel and tires will be offered in the second model year. That's pretty cool.
which is the 3X if you're keeping track of this terrible way to name stuff. So we don't have a good market study because like the Teslas, you're not allowed to buy parts. You have to do everything through a dealer. I watched a YouTube video like 4 years ago, some dude who bought a couple wrecked Teslas and like he was trying to get basically like one of the new Teslas as cheap as possible, rebuilding them all. Couldn't get it because there's just no support from the company. Seeing what GM does, I'm assuming, and the direction we're going, you're seeing a bunch more EVs come out. I'm assuming there's going to be a burgeoning market for this where there's just a ton of stuff you can do. But like even like the little stuff, I just wonder, ball joints. Are they using like, can you go to Rock Auto and get some Moogs and throw them on your truck? Or like, where are you even getting these parts from? That's what I wonder about. These first couple of years with these, boy, they're going to be salty to keep.
Yeah, I think with anything that's brand new, right? Like there isn't going to be an aftermarket initially because it's not going to be wide produced. I don't know how many were reserved.
Yeah, actually, I have no idea. I couldn't readily find that. If you do, that would be great. But yeah, the long term of that is it's just obviously like 10 to 15 years from now, like pretty much every major manufacturer is going to have an EV vehicle. I know, I think either China or Korea has a couple of vehicles coming out. I would assume we're going to see a lot more out of foreign automakers. The i8 for BMW was huge. We're going to see it. It's a changing of the times, which is kind of unfortunate. Obviously, with this, it's going to be a quiet motor,
Sure.
which, we're gearheads. We love to hear loud engines. We like it. So that would be something that would be different.
Play it over your Bose sound system.
Well, or, hey, even modern cars, a lot of them tune in not tune in, but they program in actual sounds to make their engines sound better. Like the Ford GT500s have like a sound chip in them to make them sound better. So, I mean, I guess you could do that, but that'll be lost on us. But, I mean, overall, 15 years from now, maybe we will have an aftermarket. But first 5 years, what are you going to do? Like, you blow a tire, like, you have to get a specially made, what is it, Bridgestone that makes them?
Well, no, Goodyear.
Goodyear, I'm sorry.
Well, let's close this out.
Final thoughts, Lou. If you had after taxes, $130,000, how seriously would you consider this over, say, like a Corvette, like a C8 or something like that?
Oh, I think I'd definitely buy it over a C8. You're gonna beat a C8 in pretty much anything.
I know. That's the crazy thing is like you're not sacrificing fast for truck.
I can't justify spending $130,000 after taxes on a Cybertruck. I don't know. What's the new Tesla truck retail at?
I don't know. It's called Cybertruck, right?
Yeah, I have no idea. I just can't see it. I can't do it. I think it's gonna be awesome. I think 5-10 years down the road, yeah, I'll consider one, but not the first model year. But it is I'd consider it over a Bronco, over the new Hemi Wrangler, the TRX. Well, maybe not the TRX because that's somewhat reasonably priced. The latest Raptor, it ranks up there for sure.
So, quick note, you can buy a single motor rear wheel drive Cybertruck for $39,000.
So there you go. I mean,
now, alternatively, 0 to 60 in 6.5. Only 250 miles. I mean, it's no Hummer.
No
But
crap.
you can get the tri-motor all-wheel drive for $70,000 that does 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds and has a 500-mile range. Only problem with the Cybertrucks, they are hideous.
They look like a foot.
Yeah, they're just terrible.
Locked
So I
up.
would much rather have this Hummer over the Cybertruck. I mean, I don't care if it performs better in every way. Like, this Hummer just looks so much better.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And maybe on next installment, we will stack rank them and get some real life feedback on who would do what. The answer to today's trivia question: Austrian prince, former California governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
All right. So on that note, we thank you guys for joining us again to discuss the Hummer and its evolution from a military vehicle to a symbol of masculinity to now an electric revolution. We will catch you next time on the Sam and Lou Intracast. Thanks for joining us.
Watts of freedom.
We are back to Studio A. A big thank you to Mr. Giannakopoulos and Mr. Faringer for their research and their work on this week's deep dive into the Hummer and to the Humvee brand and everything that now where it's heading, especially with the all-electric super truck. That's going to be incredible. I've been doing some reading on that and really excited about that. So, Sam, Lou, as always, great job. Appreciate the hard work you guys put into things. As we are proverbially climbing a mountain in, let's say, a Hummer H2, we are now at the summit and at the end of this episode. And for that, I just want to say, be sure to come back next week. Tune in to what we're doing here at the end of December. We are excited about ending this year as strong as possible, and we are all hopeful for a much healthier, much more freedom-enjoying 2021. And perhaps put the global situation behind us if we can. Because together it's all about car community, car culture. And for now, I'll sign off with drive well, be well, take care.